The Hong Kong International Martial Arts Expo was buzzing with energy. Fighters, fans, instructors, and legends from every corner of the world had gathered under one roof. Cameras flashed, crowds roared, and the entire hall pulsed with excitement. Among the biggest names invited were two icons, Bolo Yeung, the mountain of muscle known for his villainous roles and brutal strength, and Steven Seagal, the calm yet intimidating Aikido master whose effortless movements made him a living myth. Bolo arrived like a force of nature, chest out, arms thick as tree trunks, and a gaze sharp enough to slice steel. People stepped aside without him even saying a word. He scanned the hall with the expression of a lion owning its territory. Across the floor, Steven Seagal stood peacefully on a small demonstration mat, teaching a group of young martial artists. His voice was calm, almost soothing. He moved slowly, explaining the principles of flow, balance, and harmony. Every now and then, he showed a technique, a wrist lock here, a shoulder throw there, all done with that signature Seagal smoothness. But while the crowd admired him, Bolo narrowed his eyes. To him, all that soft, effortless movement looked like a dance, pretty, polished, but weak. He crossed his arms and let out a quiet scoff. Hollywood Aikido, he muttered. Looks good. Means nothing. A few people nearby heard him and glanced nervously. Whispering followed. Seagal continued demonstrating, completely unaware of the storm approaching him, until Bolo stepped forward, his footsteps heavy, echoing across the mat like warning drums. The crowd felt the tension immediately. Conversation stopped. Cameras lifted. Seagal slowly turned his head, calm as ever, eyes steady. Bolo smirked. You claim to use an opponent's energy against him? He said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Let's see it. A ripple of shock spread through the hall. Some fans gasped. Others cheered, sensing drama. The young students on the mat froze, unsure what to do. Seagal stayed perfectly still. No anger, no surprise, just quiet, unreadable confidence. Are you sure you want that? He asked softly. Bolo cracked his knuckles, grin widening. Oh, I'm very sure. The crowd held its breath. What happened next would leave the entire arena stunned. A hush fell over the entire expo hall as Bolo Yeung stood towering in front of Steven Seagal. What had started as a peaceful demonstration was now turning into the most unexpected showdown the audience had ever seen. Seagal didn't move. He didn't tighten his stance or shift his feet. His posture remained relaxed, almost lazy, one hand resting lightly on his hip while the other hung casually by his side. The contrast between the two men was striking. Bolo, built like a granite statue, radiating pure force, and Seagal, calm as still water, his expression unreadable. Bolo took a step closer, his shadow falling over Seagal. You think that soft stuff will work on someone like me? He said, voice dripping with challenge. Seagal blinked slowly, the corners of his lips barely lifting. I think, he replied in a quiet, steady tone. You're angry at something that has nothing to do with me. The audience reacted with a collective OHHH. But Bolo didn't flinch. His jaw tightened, his neck muscles bulging as he stared down the Aikido master. You've made a career pretending to be untouchable, Bolo growled. Today, let's find out if you really are. Seagal raised an eyebrow. If that's what you want. The simplicity of his answer irritated Bolo more than any insult could have. It wasn't disrespect, it was worse. It was indifference. The crowd sensed it too, and the tension multiplied. Spectators pushed closer, forming a circle around the two legends. Phones rose in every direction. Even martial arts instructors who had been demonstrating on other mats abandoned their stations to witness what was about to unfold. A young fighter whispered, Bro, this is Bolo Yeung. Seagal better be careful. Another replied, Careful? This guy's gonna get ragdolled if he's not legit. But older martial arts masters shook their heads knowingly. Don't underestimate Seagal, one said. Stillness is deceptive. As if on cue, Bolo took another step forward, close enough now that their chests were nearly touching. He stared into Seagal's calm eyes, trying to read him, but there was nothing to read. Seagal's expression remained steady, breathing slow and even. Bolo smirked, then suddenly shoved him. A sharp, heavy push, the kind meant to knock a man off balance. But Seagal didn't budge. He slid his back foot a mere inch, absorbing the force like he had absorbed thousands of attacks in training over decades. His torso barely rocked. The crowd gasped. Bolo expected at least a stumble. The fact that Seagal held his ground made irritation flare behind his eyes. "Oh, you're going to play it like that?" Bolo sneered, voice rising. "Fine." He pushed again, harder. This time, Seagal stepped back deliberately, not out of weakness but out of control, then returned to his exact position. "You done?" he asked calmly. That tone, uninterested, almost bored, made Bolo's face heat with anger. He clenched his fists, knuckles cracking like thunder. "You don't take me seriously," "Be on the lookout," said. "I take you exactly as seriously as I need to," Seagal replied. The crowd erupted again. Bolo couldn't stand it anymore. He jabbed forward with a quick, testing strike, not full power, but fast for a man his size. A move meant to measure Seagal's reactions. Seagal's response was instant and frighteningly effortless. He simply turned his wrist, redirected the jab, and let Bolo's arm float harmlessly past him. It was so quick and smooth that the audience didn't even process what happened until Bolo stumbled a half step forward. Gasps echoed all around. Bolo jerked his arm back, eyes widening for the first time. That wasn't luck. That wasn't chance. That was skill. Real, deeply ingrained skill. But admitting that wasn't an option for Bolo's pride. He growled under his breath. "You think you're good because of one move?" "I think," Seagal said softly, "you should stop before you make a mistake you can't take back." That line, calm but razor sharp, landed like a slap. The crowd leaned in, expecting Bolo to explode. And he nearly did. His breathing grew heavier, chest expanding and contracting like a bull preparing to charge. Sweat formed on his brow, both from heat and from the realization that this wasn't going to be as easy as he thought. But his ego pushed him forward. He lowered his stance, muscles flexed, legs spreading shoulder-width apart. "Let's see what you can really do, Seagal," he said. "No cameras, no choreography, real power." The entire hall vibrated with excitement. People shouted, others cheered, and the energy reached a boiling point. But before the clash happened, the narrator moment, your engagement point, lands. White medium star engagement break. AAPISS whacked count SI country or count SI city SI deck rahiho? Comment Karka Bateo. Let's see where all the Legends fans are watching from. Bolo cracked his neck, ready to attack for real now. Seagal inhaled slowly, eyes half-lidded, body still soft and relaxed. The real confrontation was about to begin, and no one in the arena had any idea what they were about to witness next. The room fell into an eerie silence the moment Steven Seagal and Bolo Yeung squared off. It wasn't an official fight, it wasn't a movie scene, and it wasn't something either man had prepared for. This was a clash of two legends whose reputations had grown far beyond Hollywood sound stages. And as the tension rose, everyone present could sense that what they were witnessing would be talked about for decades. Seagal stood calm, almost unnervingly so. His hands were relaxed, hanging loose by his sides, as if he were moments away from meditating instead of potentially defending himself. Bolo, on the other hand, carried an entirely different type of energy, raw, aggressive, and rooted in years of bodybuilding and the brutal realism of Hong Kong action cinema. His chest rose and fell with slow, controlled breaths, and his eyes locked onto Seagal like a predator sizing up its prey. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then Bolo stepped forward. It wasn't a full attack, but it wasn't friendly either. More like a test. A sharp jab aimed near Seagal's shoulder, quick enough to get a reaction but controlled enough to stop if needed. Bolo wanted to see whether Seagal's reputation as a devastating Aikido master was real or just Hollywood storytelling. But Seagal didn't flinch. In fact, he barely seemed to acknowledge the movement at all. Instead, he shifted his stance, just a subtle repositioning of his feet, and suddenly the mood changed. The air tightened. A few onlookers exchanged nervous glances. Bolo smirked, mistaking Seagal's calmness for fear or hesitation. That was the moment things went from testing to provoking. This time, Bolo lunged forward with real force, a short, explosive burst of speed that caught everyone off guard. His hands shot out to grab Seagal's wrist, a classic trapping technique used by bodybuilders turned fighters who rely on brute power. If Bolo managed to get a solid grip, he could overpower almost anyone. Almost. Before Bolo's fingers even closed around Seagal's wrist, Seagal moved. Not fast in a flashy, cinematic way, but efficiently, almost frighteningly so. His hand snapped up, redirected Bolo's arm, and twisted it in a direction human joints were never meant to turn. The sound Bolo made, a sharp grunt, was the first sign that Seagal's intervention had landed exactly where he intended. Then came the moment no one present would ever forget. With one fluid motion, Seagal stepped in, pivoted his hips, and sent Bolo crashing downward. It wasn't a dramatic movie throw, not the kind where bodies fly across rooms. It was far worse, a short, brutal, controlled takedown designed to disable rather than entertain. Bolo hit the ground hard. For a man built like a granite statue, the fall was shocking. His breath left his lungs in a single explosive gust, and for a second, he couldn't move. Those who knew martial arts recognized immediately what had happened. Seagal hadn't just thrown him. He'd completely taken his balance, stripped his center of gravity, and neutralized every ounce of strength Bolo possessed. Seagal didn't step back dramatically or pose like a victorious fighter. Instead, he simply released Bolo's wrist and stood there, calm as ever, as if he'd just done something as simple as adjusting a chair. The room stayed silent. Bolo rose slowly, rubbing his shoulder, his pride hurting far worse than his body. His expression said everything. He couldn't believe what had just happened. For decades, he had been the unstoppable force, on screen, in the gym, and in every physical confrontation he'd ever faced. Men who stood across from him usually backed down before anything even happened. But Seagal didn't back down. He didn't even treat him like a threat. That was what stung the most. Still, what Bolo did next surprised everyone. He nodded. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't surrender. It was acknowledgment. A silent gesture between two martial artists from different worlds. One built on brute strength and explosive power. The other built on subtle technique and terrifying efficiency. Didn't expect that, Bolo muttered, half to himself. Seagal simply adjusted his sleeve. Power's good, he said quietly, but it won't save you if you don't know where to put it. Bolo didn't argue. How could he? He had just learned that lesson firsthand, in the most painful way possible. From that moment on, the tension in the room evaporated, replaced by a strange sense of mutual respect. People who'd been frozen in place finally exhaled. A few even whispered about what they'd seen, already crafting stories that would spread through gyms, dojos, and film sets like wildfire. Bolo never tried to test Seagal again, not because he feared him, but because he understood him. An understanding, in martial arts, is the difference between ego and growth. Later, when people asked Bolo about the incident, he never denied it, but he never exaggerated it either. He simply said, Seagal's the real deal. And coming from Bolo Yeung, a man who rarely gave compliments, that meant more than any Hollywood publicity stunt ever could. Long before that unexpected showdown between Bolo Yeung and Steven Seagal, a silent rivalry had been brewing, not between the men themselves, but among the people around them. Hollywood was changing. The era of old-school martial artists was fading, replaced by choreographed action, stunt doubles, and computer-enhanced fight scenes. The real fighters, the ones with scars, discipline, and years of real combat, felt like they were being pushed aside. And that's where the tension started. Bolo Yeung, with his massive physique and intimidating screen presence, had spent decades earning respect in Hong Kong cinema. He wasn't just an actor, he was a symbol of power. A man whose muscles seemed carved out of stone. A man who trained harder and suffered more than most people could imagine. But when he moved to America for more opportunities, he realized something quickly. Hollywood didn't care how tough you were. It only cared how tough you looked. Steven Seagal, meanwhile, was one of the few martial artists who didn't just look dangerous. He was dangerous. A 7th-degree black belt in Aikido, trained in Japan, deeply respected by martial arts communities long before Hollywood discovered him. Unlike many actors, Seagal didn't need stuntmen. He didn't need camera angles to look powerful. His movements were sharp, efficient, and terrifyingly real. Naturally, the industry began comparing them. Whose style was deadlier? Who would win in a real fight? Who was the true embodiment of martial arts? Rumors spread. Interviews added fuel. Fans debated endlessly. And slowly, a narrative formed that Steven Seagal's technique-based martial arts were superior to Beyond the Lookout Young's raw power. Bolo heard those whispers, and he didn't like them. It wasn't that he hated Seagal. He didn't even know the man well. But as a lifelong martial artist, pride mattered. Legacy mattered. And every time someone claimed Seagal could easily neutralize someone as powerful as him, Bolo felt something twist inside him, a mix of doubt, curiosity, and bruised ego. The tipping point came during a private martial arts event in Los Angeles. A group of producers and fight coordinators gathered to discuss authenticity in action films. Seagal was there as a technical consultant. Bolo attended as a guest of honor. The atmosphere was respectful at first, until someone made a careless comment. If Steven Seagal and Bolo Yeung ever fought for real, Seagal would finish it in seconds. Bolo didn't say anything outwardly, but his jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. The room felt the shift, even though he remained perfectly polite. Later that evening, Bolo watched Seagal give a small demonstration. The fluidity and precision impressed him, but something inside him rebelled. He wanted to know for himself. He wanted to test where he stood. And deep down, he wanted to prove something, not just to the room, but to himself. That's why, after Seagal finished speaking, Bolo approached him. Not aggressively, not angrily, just directly. "You're very skilled," he had said, voice steady. "But I've heard many things. Maybe too many." Seagal raised an eyebrow, not quite understanding where this was going. "I don't believe in rumors," Bolo added. "Only in what I see, what I feel." It wasn't exactly a challenge, but it wasn't not a challenge either. Seagal understood immediately. He didn't puff his chest. He didn't act superior. He simply nodded. "If you want to test something," he said quietly, "we can test." And so the two men stepped aside, away from the crowd. A few close insiders followed, sensing something historic was about to happen. The atmosphere changed instantly. It wasn't anger, it was something deeper. Two martial artists stripping away ego, titles, movie fame, and stepping into a primal, unfiltered reality. For the first time in years, both men felt it. The electric anticipation of facing someone who wasn't afraid of them. But while Seagal walked into that moment with calm confidence, Bolo walked in with something else. Pressure. Pressure from comparisons. Pressure from decades of being known as the unstoppable one. Pressure from feeling like he needed to defend not just his image, but his entire martial identity. That internal weight blinded him to the truth. This wasn't a movie set. There were no retakes, no choreo, no camera angles, no slow-motion flexing, just a test of pure martial ability. And when the moment came, when Bolo reached for Seagal, expecting a clash of strength, he was met with technique so subtle and so brutally efficient that he didn't even understand what had happened until he was already on the ground. For weeks afterward, Bolo replayed the moment in his mind. How could someone move that fast? How could someone neutralize his strength so easily? How did Seagal stay so calm, even when Beyond the Lookout attacked with full intent? The truth slowly settled in. It wasn't luck. It was mastery. Not the flashy kind you see on screen. Not the exaggerated, muscle-driven power people associate with action stars. But the quiet mastery of someone who had trained his entire life in redirecting force, breaking balance, and finishing conflicts with surgical precision. And as painful as that realization was, it also brought something unexpected: respect. Because in martial arts, the moment you're humbled is also the moment you begin to grow again. Bolo never denied what happened that day, not because he was embarrassed, but because it reminded him of why he became a martial artist in the first place. To learn, to evolve, to understand. And that moment with Steven Seagal taught him something no movie role ever could. The Martial Arts Expo was at its peak. Spectators filled every corner, phones held high, voices buzzing with excitement. Steven Seagal had just demonstrated how he effortlessly redirected Bolo Yeung's aggressive grab in Part 3, and although it lasted only a few seconds, it lit the entire arena on fire. But for Bolo, that brief exchange wasn't just a technical demonstration. It felt like a crack in his armor, a mistake, a bruise to his pride, a reminder that brute strength alone wasn't enough. And as the whispers in the audience grew louder, something inside him tightened, harder, sharper, and hotter than before. The tension in the air was thick. People whispered, "Did Seagal just throw Bolo?" He made it look easy. No way Bolo lets that slide. And that last whisper, that one sentence, hit Bolo like gasoline on a flame. He straightened slowly, breathing heavy, nostrils flaring. His massive chest rose and fell like a caged beast preparing to unleash everything it had been holding back. Seagal watched him calmly. No smirk, no arrogance, just that same unreadable, composed expression. "Bolo," he said gently, "let's keep this." But Bolo cut him off. "No more demonstrations," he growled. "This time, I come for real." A thunderstorm of gasps ripped through the crowd. Security stepped forward, unsure if they should intervene, but Seagal raised one hand lightly, signaling them to stay back. If he was intimidated, he didn't show it. If he was afraid, no one could see it. Bolo lowered himself into a stance he hadn't used in years, a deep, powerful horse stance, legs rooted like pillars, fists clenched with unstoppable intent. His entire body flexed, muscles rippling like coiled steel. The arena fell silent. Even the cameras stopped shaking, as if their owners were afraid to blink. Bolo's voice boomed. "You rely on soft movements. Flow. Balance." He cracked his neck slowly. "I want to see if that can stop a man who comes at you like a tank." Something in Seagal's eyes shifted, not fear, but a kind of sadness. He knew this wasn't about proving superiority. This was a man drowning in his own pride, fighting a battle inside himself. But if Bolo demanded the truth, Seagal would show him. "Then come," Seagal said softly. Bolo exploded forward. A blur of raw power. Years of bodybuilding. A lifetime of conditioning. The charge of a man who had been waiting his entire life to face someone who wasn't afraid of him. The ground shook under his steps. Spectators screamed. Some backed away. Others leaned in closer. Bolo swung a right hook, a punch that could shatter concrete. But Seagal didn't block. He didn't dodge. He simply sidestepped at the last second and guided Bolo's wrist just enough to redirect the force. Bolo stumbled, caught off balance. Before he could recover, Seagal's hand snapped to his elbow. A twist, a shift of weight, a subtle rotation of the hips, and Bolo dropped to one knee. His face contorted, not from pain, but shock. He tried to rise, muscles bulging, veins popping, sweat dripping. But Seagal's technique was perfect, his leverage absolute. Bolo was trapped. In front of thousands. In front of cameras. In front of his own ego. The crowd couldn't believe what they were seeing. Seagal's controlling him. He can't move. That's insane. Bolo growled, trying to break free through sheer power. But Seagal tightened the pressure just slightly, enough to signal. Don't push. You'll get hurt. Bolo froze, breathing heavy. The two men locked eyes. And in that moment, something inside Bolo finally cracked. Not physically, but emotionally. He wasn't angry at Seagal. He wasn't humiliated by the crowd. He was angry at the truth. For decades, he relied on power. For decades, he dominated through size and intensity. For decades, people bowed before his presence. But here was a man who didn't bend. A man who didn't fear him. A man whose strength came from mastery, not muscle. Slowly, Seagal eased off, letting Bolo stand. The mountain of muscle rose shakily, rubbing his arm, breathing heavily. Seagal stayed calm, hands lowered, ready to defend but not attack. The crowd waited. Would Bolo erupt again? Would he storm away? Would he pretend nothing happened? No. For the first time in his life, Bolo Yeung did something unexpected. He bowed. A deep, sincere, respectful bow. The arena erupted. Cheers, applause, shouts of admiration. People weren't cheering for Seagal's victory. They were cheering for Bolo's humility. He straightened up, face flushed, eyes intense, but voice steady. You are better than the rumors, Bolo said quietly. Stronger than the stories. He paused. And more disciplined than I expected. Seagal nodded once. We all have things to learn. Bolo let out a slow breath. Today, he said, I learned mine. But the story wasn't over yet. Because the world had just witnessed something historic. And soon, that moment would explode across the internet, causing consequences neither man expected. What happened on that expo mat should have ended right there. Two martial artists testing each other, exchanging respect, and walking away wiser. But the world is never that simple, especially in the age of smartphones, instant uploads, and viral outrage. By the time Bolo Yeung and Steven Seagal shook hands, hundreds of videos had already been recorded. Some were live-streamed. Others were clipped, edited, slowed down, zoomed in. And within minutes, the internet exploded. TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, Twitter, Facebook. Every platform flooded with one headline. Steven Seagal humiliates Bolo Yeung in real fight. But the clips didn't show the full story. They didn't show Bolo's respect. They didn't show his bow. They didn't show the humility behind the confrontation. They showed only the moment Seagal redirected Bolo's attack and dropped him to a knee. In the age of quick judgments, that was more than enough. Within the hour, the expo staff noticed reporters rushing toward the arena. Bloggers, influencers, podcasters, they all sprinted like wolves catching a scent of blood. Bolo felt it before he fully understood it. He saw the flashes. He heard the murmurs. He sensed the shift in the energy around him. This wasn't admiration anymore. It was spectacle. One reporter shoved a microphone toward him. Bolo, how does it feel to be taken down in seconds? Are you still the strongest man in martial arts? Another yelled, do you think Steven Seagal exposed you today? Was the fight real? Did he overpower you? The questions hit him like punches. But Beyond the Lookout stayed silent, breathing deeply, trying to remain grounded. The humility he showed on the mat was real, but it was not meant to be served as food for gossip. Meanwhile, Seagal was approached by a different group, fans who praised every second of the viral clip. You dominated him. That was insane. We always knew you'd crush someone like Bolo. But Seagal's eyes hardened. He didn't like the tone. He didn't like the disrespect. He didn't like the twisted narrative forming around something that was never meant to be a fight. That wasn't domination, he said firmly. That was martial arts. And Bolo fought with honor. But the internet didn't want honor. It wanted headlines. The clip hit 10 million views in 2 hours. Then 50 million. Then 100 million. Comment sections were on fire. Bolo got destroyed. Seagal is a real fighter. Beyond the Lookout only has muscles, no skill. Others defended Bolo. Respect to him for stepping up. He was humble in the end. People don't understand power versus technique. The debate grew, and so did the pressure. Back at the hotel, Bolo sat alone on the edge of his bed, scrolling through the endless stream of videos and comments. His massive hands looked almost small holding the phone. His heart felt heavy. He had fought hundreds of battles. He had endured injuries, criticism, defeat. But this felt different. He wasn't angry at Seagal. He wasn't even embarrassed. He was angry that a personal moment of growth had been twisted into entertainment. A knock came at the door. It was Seagal. Bolo opened the door but didn't speak. Seagal stepped inside quietly, sensing the weight in the air. "You're upset," Seagal said plainly. Bolo didn't deny it. "Not because you beat me," he said, "but because they don't understand." Seagal nodded slowly. "They never do. Not at first." Bolo exhaled sharply. "I bowed to show respect, not surrender. And anyone who understands martial arts," Seagal replied, "knows exactly what that bow meant." Bolo met his eyes, searching for sincerity, and he found it. "Let them say what they want," Seagal continued calmly. "We know the truth." Bolo sat down, calmer now. "Still that spreads fast. Too fast. Then we speak faster," Seagal said. Bolo raised an eyebrow. The press conference. The next morning, the expo organizers held an emergency press event. Cameras filled the room. Reporters packed every corner, and a storm of anticipation buzzed through the air. Bolo and Seagal walked onto the stage together. Side by side, a united front. Gasps echoed across the room. Cameras flashed like lightning. The first reporter jumped in. "Bolo, did Steven Seagal defeat you?" Bolo stood tall, chest broad, voice deep and steady. "We were not fighting," he said firmly. "We were practicing." Another reporter pressed. "But he dropped you." Bolo raised a hand. "Yes, he used technique. That is martial arts. I respect that." Seagal spoke next. "And Bolo showed discipline by not escalating. He could have hurt me if he wanted to." The room went silent. "Wait. What?" Seagal continued. "You only saw the moment I used leverage. You did not see the moments he held back, the strength he controlled, the respect he showed." Bolo nodded. "And you did not see what I learned," he said, "that even a strong man must stay humble. Steven taught me something valuable." The reporters looked stunned. No rivalry, no anger, just mutual respect. Then Bolo delivered the line that broke the internet again, but this time in a better way. "Real warriors don't fight for cameras. They fight for honor." The room erupted, not with chaos, but with applause. The headlines changed overnight. Bolo and Seagal show what real martial arts is about. A rare display of humility in a viral world. Two legends, one lesson, respect. The internet shifted. The mockery faded. The respect grew. And the world realized something powerful. What looked like humiliation was actually transformation. But the final chapter, the worldwide impact of this moment, was still yet to come. The press conference was supposed to calm the drama, but instead, it ignited something bigger. Clips of Bolo and Seagal standing side by side, speaking about honor, discipline, and mutual respect spread like wildfire. People weren't sharing the takedown anymore. They were sharing the message. Within hours, a new headline replaced the old viral chaos. Real warriors respect each other. Bolo and Seagal set the internet straight. And suddenly, the world saw the story differently. Around the world. In Japan, traditional dojos played the press conference video to their students, showing how martial artists, no matter how strong, bow to humility. In the Philippines, newspapers praised the rare moment where two action legends broke the Hollywood stereotype and chose wisdom over ego. In China, Bolo Yeung's fans filled Weibo with messages of honor. Strength is nothing without humility. Bolo showed what a real fighter is. He bowed, not because he lost, but because he respects the art. Even Steven Seagal's critics, who often accused him of arrogance, were stunned. They had never seen him speak so calmly, so respectfully, so publicly about another fighter's strength. The fans respond. For the first time in a long time, the internet united. People who once mocked martial arts now talked about it with admiration. Teenagers who had never set foot in a dojo began signing up for classes. Instructors around the world reported a surge of new students who said they were inspired by the Bolo Seagal moment. The viral clip wasn't just entertainment anymore. It became a lesson, a symbol, a message. Comment sections changed from insults to inspiration. Bolo bowed with honor. Seagal protected him, not embarrassed him. This is how grown men handle conflict. This is martial arts at its best. For once, the internet wasn't tearing someone down. It was lifting two legends up. Bolo Yeung's personal revelation. Back in his hotel room, Bolo sat near the window, watching the city lights. The world hadn't seen him like this, quiet, thoughtful, almost vulnerable. He wasn't ashamed of what happened. He wasn't upset about the takedown. He wasn't thinking about the viral drama. He was thinking about something deeper. For the first time in decades, someone had pushed him to grow again. That was rare. That was precious. That was the true meaning of martial arts. Steven Seagal joined him moments later, carrying 2 cups of tea. They didn't speak at first. They didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was respectful. Finally, Bolo spoke quietly. Maybe the world needed to see this. Seagal nodded. Maybe we all did. Bolo chuckled softly. I spent years playing the strongest man alive. Maybe I forgot what real strength looks like. Seagal raised his cup. Real strength is knowing when to fight and when not to. They clinked cups. 2 warriors. 2 legends. 2 men who understood each other more deeply now than they ever had. The final message to the world. The expo organizers invited Bolo and Seagal to close the event with a final speech. Thousands gathered in the arena, waiting to hear their words. Bolo took the mic first. What happened yesterday, he began, was not a fight. It was a lesson, a reminder that martial arts is not about ego or fame, but about respect. The crowd applauded. Seagal followed. In a world full of anger, he said, we must choose discipline. In a world full of violence, we must choose control. And in a world full of competition, we must choose respect. The arena erupted, cheers, whistles, clapping, shouting. Then Bolo delivered the line that sealed the legacy of the entire story. Do not admire the man who never falls. Admire the man who falls and still bows with honor. Seagal placed a hand on Bolo's shoulder. The crowd stood. It became a standing ovation, long, thunderous, emotional. And just like that, what began as a moment of tension turned into a global symbol of humility. The legacy. In the weeks that followed, martial arts schools saw record enrollment. Clips of the event were used in motivational speeches. Both men were praised as ambassadors of true martial values. But the greatest impact was something no one expected. The world finally understood that real strength isn't about overpowering others. It's about mastering yourself. And that is how one viral moment, born from pride, tension, and misunderstanding, transformed into one of the most powerful martial arts lessons ever shared.